Welcome everybody. First of all, my words of thanks for your invitation to come to Taipei, to Taiwan. It's my first time here, so I'm honored. And I would like to thank the organizers of this seminar, including the Contemporary Art Foundation, the city government, of course, and its Department of Culture, and our host of the seminar here at the Taipei Fine Arts Museum. Thank you. And thank you all for coming. I'm not sure if I'm going to speak a full hour. I think it's a bit too long. You would be tired of me speaking so long. So I think it's my talk will be a bit shorter. First, I will give a bit of or share with you some ideas and notions about institutional development in the biennial field. That is the topic of this seminar. And also I'll try to touch upon some issues that you have addressed here, including arts management, or the way I see it, education through the biennial. And then I will speak a little bit about the foundation that I founded in 2009, the Biennial Foundation, and explain you what we do and why we were founded. And and perhaps you might have some questions then also for me. So, the biennial between exhibition and institution. Very often I find myself speaking in symposia like this one, wherein the notion of the biennial as a paradigm of the mega show, which happens sporadically under a steady rhythm, is juxtaposed to the notion of the institution, the museum, the Kunsthalle, or the art center, as a paradigm of building permanency. This dichotomy between the biennial on the one hand and the institution on the other immediately touches upon the point I like to make when I chose for the title of my talk here, which is not the biennial vis-à-vis the institution, but rather the biennial as an institution, or in a moderate version, the biennial between exhibition and institution. Up to date, it has been customary that in the context of discussing the Contemporary Art Biennial, we reflect on it in one way or another. We either see biennials as institutions or as exhibitions. These views are sometimes set in opposition to each other, but frequently they are used as if interchangeable. And the distinction between these two tropes is thus too often overlooked and rarely conceptualized. While it may be that biennials are both exhibitions and institutions simultaneously, acknowledging the distinction between these two concepts will help us to better understand the biennial, as well as to further its critical discourse. The situation of the biennial is rather complex, and when we try to work out how to deal with that complexity, it is important to study a wide variety of biennial models on different sides, both historical and contemporary. Often large in scale, sometimes dispersed across several locations in a city or a certain site, at times locally embedded through site-specific commissions while being global in ambition, and most of the times offering a new or alternative perspective in the story and history of art, the biennial stands for a range of wildly different artistic possibilities. Now, reducing biennials to merely curatorial platforms appears limiting. Although there is an overwhelming tendency among advocates of biennial culture to place the history of biennials within the history of exhibitions. According to Ranjit Hoskote, and I quote him, "The biennial can be seen within a conceptualist lineage of exhibition making, a show as a testing ground for artistic innovation, a laboratory in which to experiment with new ways of activating the relationship between viewers and artworks, between artworks and their sites, and between artworks and their architecture of display." End of quote. It is good and it is necessary to study and contextualize the biennial in exhibition history. However, it is also time to critically consider and regard the biennial as what has become an important and influential cultural institution existing all over the world today. Indeed, one could argue that biennials have become, in the span of just a few decades, some of the most vital and visible sites for the production, distribution, and generation of public discourse around contemporary art. The ongoing biennalization process is a process of transformation of how and where art is being produced, presented, viewed through the format of the biennial and its many locations. The enormous growth of biennial culture asks for an analysis of the changes in the field. It is within the context and increase of biennials, namely, that a strong decentralization and reorientation process has taken place, reflecting a transition of the art situ, which has bypassed the traditional Western dominance in the story of art. The biennial has contributed to the subversion of the former division between a center and a periphery of civilizations, and has challenged the Western illusion of supremacy in the field of artistic creation and institutional representation. The ubiquitous biennial has imagined and continues to imagine a global world of art. Maria Lavajeva stated in The Biennial Reader, and The Biennial Reader is a book that I co-edited, maybe it was mentioned, with two colleagues, Elena Filipovic and Solveig Ofstebo. It's an anthology on large-scale exhibitions of contemporary art. It was published in 2009. So Maria Lavajeva stated in our book that we should remind ourselves that speaking about the biennial is an impossible task, as no single form representing this entire hybrid field of cultural endeavor exists. And I fully agree with her. As most of you know, over 150 or even almost 200 biennials of contemporary art operate around the globe today, sharing similar objectives and perspectives and practices, but at the same time being extremely diverse. And I mean diverse in scale, organizational structure, financial structure, scope, and identity. Biennials in places where the arts infrastructure is well developed have different functions, necessities, and challenges than biennials where the basic infrastructure necessary for the advancement of contemporary art does not exist. We talk about the same biennial, but the contexts in which they operate and have meaning are extremely diverse. In order to articulate the space in which a biennial can provide an added value and can bring something to the table that does not exist or would not exist otherwise, it is fundamental that the function of the biennial and its meaning for the public sphere is measured against the background of all existent infrastructural, locational, and relational coordinates within the concrete circumstances under question. In other words, it is the very unique relationship between or combination of cultural, geopolitical, and aesthetical issues that make biennials what they are. Biennials in cities like, for example, Liverpool, Berlin, New York, or Sydney need to articulate their critical position and distinctiveness vis-à-vis other institutions and platforms for contemporary art that also exist in their locations. And this is one of their ongoing challenges. But now think about biennials in places like Cochin in the south of India, Marrakesh in Morocco, Konjic, which is close to Sarajevo in Bosnia-Herzegovina, Ramallah in the Palestinian territories, Lubumbashi, the Democratic Republic of Congo, or Curitiba in the north of Brazil. Solely by location they have relevance, and by their initiation they immediately create a stimulating impact and encouraging effect on the arts activity, discourse, and cultural exchange within and with their region. Adriano Pedrosa wrote in an essay which was titled the centrality of the peripheral biennial. And this is a term I actually don't agree with, the term peripheral biennial, but we understand what he means. In one of the issues of the Exhibitionist recently the following, and I quote him: "The truly relevant biennial today is a phenomenon of the Global South, relying on independence, creativity, and ingenuity from its organizers, and drawing crucial connections between different locales and productions." End of quote. Some of what he calls peripheral biennials have embarked on moving beyond organizing a spectacular large-scale international exhibition. Many biennials in non-capital cities have made themselves the producers, the educators, and hosts of long-term artist residencies, as well as discursive programs that transpire in between the perennial shows. These non-Western biennials, and again for lack of a better term that I don't have yet, which constitute in fact a big part of the biennials, can also be regarded as sites of informal education. Perhaps one of the greatest features of these biennials is the fact that their potential and major audience is the local community, rather than art lovers and specialists. The challenges in terms of educational practices of these biennials are centered around the relationship they establish with the people on their sides. Many in this league of biennials represent a serious possibility and provide concrete examples of how to engage with local conditions in a valuable and interesting way and extend the scope of our understanding of what the meaning of a biennial can be in different political geographies. An example, the Mercosul Biennial in Porto Alegre is a good example here. The concentration on education and pedagogy there has created an epistemological change of the biennial itself. As they say, the Mercosul Biennial has become an extended education program with an exhibition every 2 years. So the other way around. The Mercosul Biennale, more than a temporary exhibition, can be regarded as a non-temporary school, covering gaps in different levels of education. Now, I've always been impressed by the Brazilian biennial example, and this includes the Bienal de Sao Paulo, and its emphasis on serving the whole community. The Brazilian biennial, and again, also the Sao Paulo Biennial, really stands out internationally because of the way it expands access to the world of art for a diversified public by enabling people of a range of ages, social classes, and cultural levels to take part in its activities. Just to give you an example, the Bienal de Sao Paulo has permanent staff on the Department of Education, 25 people that are there constantly working, teaching, training, etc. So it's not just during the biennial, it's an ongoing policy, and the same counts for the Bienal de Mercosul in Porto Alegre. Access to culture is widely seen as a public good, and biennials can play an important role in this. Generally speaking, one could state that many biennials have a focus on encouragement of public engagement and pedagogy nowadays. Various biennials create in the local context a side of public participation that is not only periodical, but also permanent. And this is another trend that relates also to the topic between exhibition and institution, that many biennials today are not only focused on their, let's say, 2 to 3 months length of presentation, but have an ongoing program of activity in between the shows. Can biennials be regarded as visible sites of informal education? I think the answer is yes. Most contemporary art biennials function as professional training programs in a natural way. Speaking for myself, I learned about art, artists, and arts management at Manifesta, the European Biennale of Contemporary Art, where I worked for over 7 years, and not really at the university where I studied art history, which was solely dedicated to the theory, neither at the postgraduate curatorial course that I did. I did an MPhil research degree at the Royal College of Art in London. I learned by doing, I would say. Biennales are both exhibitions and institutions defined by their improvisational, experimental, and spontaneous editions, as well as by their durational persistence and continuity. Biennales are processes of accumulation. Over the years, editions inhabit the public eye as a succession of motives and stories, highs and lows. It is this aspect, a sense of duration and constituency, and of spectacle and ceremony, that forms the distinct character of the biennial. And within this apparent contradiction of the temporary opposite the durational, our training and learning takes place. A biennial is more easily and quickly established than a museum, which usually takes up years of planning and construction. Still, a biennial can have an equally stimulating influence on the arts activity and discourse in a city, one of the reasons of its attractiveness. A biennial is a hybrid organism involving various levels of engagement. Biennials can do many things, which not means they have to or are interested in doing so. Whenever a new biennial starts up in a city or a nation space, it is key to not mimic existing models, but instead to articulate a model radical for and fitting to the place in question. Geeta Kapoor recently stated the following, and I quote her: "I would argue for each biennial fighting its battle on the ground and making unpredictable moves in aesthetic and political terms from within that struggle. Rather than see the biennial as having successfully or ruefully globalized a place, a city, a nation, a region, it is better to see it open up a field of contradictions and test forms of praxis available through art." End of quote. Up to date, the biennial debate has focused mostly on biennales as exhibitions. The biennial as an exhibition platform appears in multiple variations and evades easy definition, as we have seen. We nonetheless can seriously look at biennials as institutions, cultural institutions, in order to understand and make sense of the changing conditions, locations, and developments in contemporary art today. The problems several prominent biennial institutions, and I accentuate here the institution, around the world have faced recently, including the biennials of Istanbul, Sydney, the Manifest Athènes and St. Petersburg, the Guangzhou Biennale recently, and even more recent also the Biennale de Sao Paulo, urge us to reconsider how we think about biennials, pointing to questions of both how they are governed and how they govern. The problems they have faced trigger us to think about funding sources of major cultural events. Do the funding sources have an impact on the supposedly independent curatorial and artistic narratives? Question mark. As we launch more biennials within the global economy of culture, the need for institutional critique of the biennial has become clear. Thank you.